So, actually, let's start with just a little bit of background
Sure.
on what you've been up to, in a little bit about where you're from and how you got to where you are here today.
So, I just grew up fixing things like bikes, and then short story is I ended up becoming a teacher, sort of by accident. I got into puppetry, worked for Jim Henson's Creature Shop for a couple years on films.
Oh, wow.
And then got homesick, went back to Seattle, became a teacher, taught mostly middle school for 7 years, and then ended up making videos for my students, and they listened to them better than me in real life, so that worked. And then I put them online, kind of on archive.org, and people started watching them like mad. And
wow.
Why?
I said, wow. That's
wow.
Yeah, I didn't know
why?
that.
I don't know.
Well, I guess wow and why, but no, I understand. That's great.
So and then got a gig with Make Magazine, making videos for them. And then worked at Etsy for about 8 months. Saw them grow from like 10 people to 60 people.
Right.
And which is just super great. Like I didn't realize I was getting an education in just all the drama that happens when you're between 10 and 60 people, but that was helpful. And then quit there because I was bored, and ended up starting MakerBot.
You got bored at Etsy.
Yep, and I thought I was actually gonna, I'd done a TV show called History Hacker where I remade inventions out of my closet.
So you haven't been doing anything. You've just been on the side, just hanging out, and I'm just kidding. That's a lot.
and then that failed because they had asked me to do it so it was really fresh for young people. And then when it came out, they were like, it didn't do very well with our core audience, which is over 61.
Didn't resonate with the over 61.
And I didn't mention Hitler, which was a problem.
I really like the History Channel, though. I mean, Am I not the typical?
You're not, actually.
I'm a 61-year-old and a 35-year-old, apparently.
Awesome. And but had a blast doing that. And when we started MakerBot, I thought it would just be something we'd do for like 10 hours a week. We'd make a couple of them a month.
So what's the so you did all this stuff, and you kind of got entrenched in the maker kind of movement. I heard make in pretty much every company that you just mentioned, and as you went along, was that by accident? Was that just you kind of fell in there, or were you like, I'm going to get into making stuff? What was the drive?
I sort of made this machine when I was at Make Magazine where I had to deliver a video every Friday where I made something, and I shot that video, was in that video. Would usually make the thing twice, one so I could figure it out, second time so I could actually film it. And then it had to be sort of special and add kittens and lasers.
What kinds of things did you make? I'm curious now.
So I did there were kind of ordinary things like hovercrafts.
Oh,
and and then, but to make it interesting, we made a bunch of hovercrafts where you basically take a leaf blower and use that to make a cushion of air. And then you have a frictionless platform, and then we just would play shuffleboard with people and hovercrafts in the back alley.
Just normal things. Yeah, right.
and just trying to keep myself from being bored. And so that was fun. But I created this machine where I just made something different every week, which if you can get a job doing that, which I was really lucky to have, it was great training for just getting things done. If you don't, set yourself a challenge of making something every day or every week, or that you just get so much that kind of okay, that's done, now I have to do the next thing, that powering through to the next thing, and that relentless just must get something done so that I can get more done is a very powerful.
You like getting stuff done.
Superpower.
It's a superpower.
So I have a manifesto called the Cult of Den Manifesto that I wrote with my sweetheart. That manifestos are good.
Everyone should write one.
Yeah, and one of the tricks is it has to contradict itself. So that So
tell us the rest of the tricks. You've done this.
Manifesto. What was the other one I came up? Get
you
things done.
You have to contradict yourself.
Well, I did this thing where I make up rules for myself. So when I was a teacher, I wanted to be an artist. So I would make up rules. So I basically made these rules, and I saw all the art in Seattle, which took like 2 nights a month, and tried to be an artist. And actually, I totally failed.
What kind of art?
I was making mostly photography, and then I got into video art, which is what transitioned me into making videos for my students.
Okay.
But you know, the sort of like laws of art is like make something that's precious, and you know, it's sort of the cult of beauty of making something that's like that you're only going to make like if you're going there's only going to be one of them, or maybe an edition of 15, and then they're gone, and you can't make any more, and and they're precious in the world, and you try and sell them for $1,000 to $5,000 each, and hopefully you sell more than one a month so you don't die. And I never sold anything, so
oh no.
So I didn't become an artist properly. But I learned, I joined the cult of beauty for a couple of years, which got me obsessed with design and trying to make things that don't suck.
Okay, so that kind of laid the foundation, and then you got into this 3D printing field, like in front of a lot of people, like really early, right? Like when did?
Yeah, when it was a bad idea.
What's that?
It was a bad idea. Like that's part
You're
of the
saying
trick.
it's a bad idea, but
that's part of the trick of like doing something.
Right.
I mean, if you're going to do hardware, you kind of have like, I mean, we launched a product after 3 months, but it was really a prototype, and we didn't really have a proper product until we launched the Replicator, which is our 3rd gen, and we're in our 4th gen MakerBot Replicator 2 as a desktop 3D printer. But like, you have to, it's, you know, it was one of those things that once we started it, I was like, I'm not letting go of this thing until it eats me.
So you were going against the grain really early. Did you, along that path, ever realize like this is going to be huge? Or have you realized that yet?
You know, we made 20, and this was before Kickstarter, and we put them up on the internet, and we thought it would take like 2 months to sell them, and during that time we would make more, and instead they sold out basically instantly. Wow. And at that moment we were like, okay, we're screwed.
How many people have 3D printed something in the audience? I'm curious.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's pretty awesome. Is that the usual? Do you ever ask that question?
You know, it's interesting. We have about 35,000 machines in the wild, but all the most interesting people in the world have them. So if you go someplace where there's interesting people, like, they're all there. So it's like, I was at, you know, so, and it's so, like, what's so interesting is I've probably met most of the people who bought the first, like, 200 machines, because they're all, like, super hardcore.
Yeah, I'd like to hear. Who was the first person that bought? Do you know the first person that bought one?
It was one of my co-founders' brothers.
Oh, okay.
And then
among like outside of friends and family.
It was a guy in San Francisco who makes stuff. He makes LED stuff.
Oh, okay.
And he actually bought it, but he was so busy with his own business, he actually didn't make it until 3 years later. And it was like one of those things that was kind of like, you have like number 2, like why don't you leave it in the box?
Yeah.
But he actually made it.
He might have he just liked the box. He liked the way it looked. No, that's cool. Yeah, I know you've had some, I mean, really big investors in your company, and some of those are really loud. So like Brad Feld was one, right? He's a big supporter. Dave McClure, I believe, is another one.
Angel, yeah.
Angel. As well as others. How did you go about finding those people or connecting with those folks?
Just sort of brute force.
Or did they find you?
No.
They never
find you. I basically asked people who were good investors. So we did a seed round with Jake Wadwick and Adrian Boyer. Adrian started the RepRap project, and Jake was one of the people who did like Vimeo and Busted Tees and College Humor. Right. And they gave us, between the two of them, gave us $75K. We gave them, that represented about 4% of MakerBot at the beginning. Wow. We gave up, that we wouldn't have had to give up if there was Kickstarter back then. And then, and we did about $8 million of revenue on that $75K before we touched our funding.
That's a big, let's hear that.
I mean, it hurt.
I
sold everything I owned, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't pay rent 1 month and got away with it, so I could buy robot parts.
Wow.
You just,
like,
when you're that far ahead and like it's such an early adopter market, like we only like succeeded because we like refused to die, I suppose. Like
right. So I'm curious now. So you're from Seattle originally, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But moved to New York in 2007.
Right. So you started, and you're in Brooklyn. You're Brooklyn-based.
That's right.
And you were in Brooklyn probably before. Now it's gotten really popular.
Back when, yeah.
So you're ahead of that curve as well. I guess what I'm getting at.
Well, I moved to New York, and I had this plan when I was in Seattle because I was making these videos. I could do them anywhere. Mm-hmm. So I thought, well, I'll go to New York for a month. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go to Paris for a month, and then I'll go to Tokyo for a month. And I went to New York, and it was awesome. Like Seattle's a very chill place. Like everybody works at, not everybody, but a lot of people work at like Microsoft, Adobe, Amazon, Boeing. They all have like jobs that end at like 5 o'clock.
Right.
And they grill salmon, which is like really tasty. And
that is delicious.
And so like when you're trying to start something up, you like need people who don't already have jobs that make more than 100K and get off at 5 o'clock.
Right.
And or you have to find people who have those jobs who are willing to like work after 5 o'clock and not grill salmon. And and that was just, it was, I have the best friends in Seattle, but it was pulling teeth to get things going. Mm-hmm. And I had this, but I did have one of the awesome things about being in Seattle was this place that called MakerBot Labs, which was where just a bunch of friends, a bunch of hackers would get together and do bad things, like just have not bad things like evil bad things, but like just bad ideas. So, I made a video that was like it was a robot that took your picture and then drew you. Mm-hmm. But what's funny is like we spent like 3 weeks on this and like 7 pizzas and 10 cases of Mountain Dew, and when it was done, I made everybody breakfast at the workshop, and I scrambled eggs with a drill gun and a fork in it. And I made a video of that and put that up. Drawing robot, like, no views. Me scrambling eggs with a drill gun, like, boing, boing, instantly.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
It's, like, frustrating.
It's frustrating. That's usually the way it works, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like...
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Okay.
But, so the thing about New York is, like, I arrived there, and it was like... I was into video blogging and making things. And people in New York, like, you don't go to New York to relax. You go to New York to get stuff,
to hustle.
to achieve something. Yeah. And so I'd like, so you go like, oh, hey, let's do something. And the person says like, oh yeah, let's set it on fire. And then you get to be like, yeah, I'll bring the gasoline. And there's that kind of energy of like, you can...
Just a regular Tuesday,
Yeah,
like,
really, like people will jump on things a little bit. So I literally went back to Seattle and put everything out on the curb and moved to New York.
Cool, very cool. And so I was curious then, family out in Seattle, like, are they totally up to speed with like what you do? I mean, it's always the question.
Yeah.
Do your parents like, how do you explain it to your parents? Do they know, could they go out and explain what you do?
I hired my dad.
Really?
Yeah, which is possibly not the most, it worked out, I'm really glad it worked out really well.
Right, yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, hiring family is always tough.
But that was, he still works at MakerBot.
What's he do for you?
So he's a brand marketer, so he helps us when we build products, we focus it and make sure that he basically runs workshops where we figure out that we're building the wrong product.
Building the wrong product?
Well, you have to.
Right, yeah. Okay, just want to make sure.
To build the right product eventually.
I have a thing in my ear, and sometimes I'm just not hearing out of this.
Oh, sure.
So I'm like, sorry, what was that? All right, so...
Yeah.
So okay, so he does workshops to figure out product fit and like...
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
Which, is probably, the fact that we really focus on building a product and getting good market fit and making it so people will want to use it is non-trivial.
Okay, so you were early in the 3D printing realm, like just recently got acquired, congratulations.
Thank you.
By a Minnesota-based company, actually. It's been relatively quiet in the space, but doing really well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, how's that acquisition been going for you? Like, what's the...
Well, we were in a position where, I was in the middle of raising a round when they approached us, and I had literally had term sheets for $40 and $50 million on a pretty awesome valuation. Mm-hmm. And so when they approached us, they were like, we'd like to talk about acquiring you. And I was like, I'm not sure you can afford us, actually.
Right.
But it was one of those things where we because we were kind of in a reluctant seller place, we got to say, and because they're smart and they're good people and we like them, it worked out. And we're in a position where we stay independent. We get to run.
That's great.
We get to keep going. You know, we got more resources and more opportunities to do what we do, and do it faster. You know, get more people using 3D printing to change the world and make it a better place. And you know, we actually spent the last 5 years working around their patents in the space, because they
around their patents.
Yeah. So when we started, the main patent has expired, but they're still, you know, they've written 500 more, which effectively, you know, it's interesting when you're doing hardware, you have to think about these things. And you know, we kind of did it weird in that we were like absurdly open hardware, but we knew if we were going to have to be a big company, we had to get a bunch of IP,
right? So
that we could, in a worst case situation, or in a best case situation, you know, have a Cold War scenario, which is what you do if you're in a hardware space, and there's IP involved. You have to get to a place where if somebody comes after you, you're like, yeah, but I got some too. So it's actually nice. We get to reach into the cookie jar now and
now you have that.
Not route and do some of the things that we couldn't do before.
Great. And that actually was a family-owned business as well, right? So that pretty interesting.
And it's in Minnesota and Rehovot, Israel, which is interesting. It's a worldwide organization. So we got to sort of, that's one of the things we get to level up is you know,
more resources,
more worldwide penetration.
Cool. All right. So what's the most creative use you've seen of MakerBot?
So there's a project that, if you haven't heard the story, it's pretty awesome. These two guys, one in Seattle and one in South Africa, worked on a project called RoboHand, which is a project where the guy in South Africa lost 4 of his fingers in a trade accident, and when he's in the hospital, he's like, I'm going to rebuild my hand. I'm going to make a hand, a true maker. And he ended up working with a guy in Seattle and making a prosthetic for himself. And then one of their friends, and they used a MakerBot. And then one of their friends has a kid who had amniotic band syndrome, which is where you're born without fingers or a thumb. You just have a palm. And that kid's dad was like, you did it. Can you make my son a hand? And they were like, sure. And these guys aren't engineers. They just wanted to do it and were relentless. And this is one of the ways to engineering is you just try it over and over again.
Yeah, they got it going.
And when it doesn't work, you make it a little bit better. And you can actually get to very, very deep engineering by just committing to get there and iterating and going in the right direction, fixing it when it breaks.
Right.
So then they shared it on our website, thingiverse.com, where people share their digital designs to be downloaded. And it's been downloaded like 60,000 times. And
wow. So
you know,
people are making hands.
Like we had a story recently, a couple days ago, where a kid saw that, had amniotic band syndrome, was born left-handed, but didn't have any fingers on his left hand, has had to awkwardly use his right hand to do drawing and writing. And so he made a RoboHand and actually modified it so it would hold a pen, and made a video drawing a picture of his dad, which is, so good.
That is really, hard.
So in many ways, like when we hear stories like those ones, we're like, okay, this is why we do what we do.
Is that where you thought it would go, though? I mean, that's pretty amazing, and I think that's, obviously we're still early in 3D printing, but did you expect those types of things, or you just let it?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like when we started, we were like, okay, we made a machine. It can make anything. What do you want?
Yeah.
And people are like,
exactly.
Because we're also used to like comparison shopping, right? Like, what do you want? Here's a machine that will make you anything, and people are like, wait.
What was the first thing you made?
Oh, shot glasses.
There you go. I was thinking that, but I didn't want to say it. But hey.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. So now people are literally making hands. There's also other folks jumping into that on the health side.
Yeah.
Doing printing. Let's talk about the future of it, of 3D printing in general.
Sure.
Like, where do you see that going? Where do you think that?
Schools.
Schools?
Yeah.
You want to talk
I want to, how many of you grew up with wood or metal shop, just out of curiosity? Wood or some sort of shop class?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all gone.
Right, it's totally gone, yeah.
Kids don't get to do anything like that. They don't get to use their hands. They don't get to make things. And if they do, it's probably 2D. It's probably drawing or painting,
Right.
if they're lucky. So one of the things that is on my agenda is just fix that and put MakerBots in every school in the United States of America.
Whoa. What was that? Put MakerBots in every school in the United States of America.
Yeah, that's on my to-do list.
That's a big statement.
Yeah. Don't tweet that, please. I don't want.
Haven't figured out the
when I
details
figure
yet.
that out, I want to really do a big push, and I don't want to. When you do, I
No
shouldn't have
cart
said
before
that.
the horse, right?
But really, I want to be able to launch that and do that right. So when I launch that, I would love your support, but hang tight.
Okay. So why is it so important to you? I mean, you mentioned that it doesn't exist, but why? Why? What's the why there?
We're in a weird time. I mean, in many ways, if you're not somebody who thinks really positively, it's really easy to be like, okay, oceans are becoming acidic and like shellfish can't make shells, and we're overfishing everything, and trees like are dying, and everything like we're sort of like breaking the earth. But at the same time, we have an opportunity to like. It's going to be so much, like, nothing's better than a hard problem, right? Like, let's figure out how we solve that. And part of that is empowering the next generation to be smarter than us. When I think about it, like, if I had a 3D printer when I was 10 years old and was doing that kind of stuff instead of Legos, I would have gotten a manufacturing education at 10 and been able to start making stuff much earlier.
Right.
And instead of being totally distracted by school, that made me think that I had to fit into some other box, and so I think like, okay, if we could just jumpstart that and get the show.
Totally possible. I mean, I'm just starting to think. You said, I just got a flash of when I was 10, there were dot matrix printers, and the most interesting thing you could do is go on your computer and make this like card, like greeting card.
Print shop, yeah.
And make
It's
a
awesome.
card with your name on it and sell that to like people or something. I don't know. It didn't really work out for me, but
banners.
that's what you could do. And now you can like make cans. Yeah, it's floors me. So anyway, I see where you're going with that. That's pretty, amazing. But bless you.
So one thing that I should probably say is like everybody should just get a MakerBot.
There you go.
Please do this because a couple reasons. One, it like changes the way you think about things in the world. And so this is, and even if you don't think you're a creative person or a maker, like all your excuses are invalid. Get one and and enjoy the way it changes the way you think about the world. It like you get to put different glasses on, and there are not many opportunities you get in life to spend $2,200 and change the way you look at the world and you think about things in the world. And when you have a MakerBot, you change the way you think about things. Like one of the stories I like to tell is there's a user on Thingiverse named Calm Tom, and he has a daughter, and his daughter at the time when he published this object was 41.5 inches tall, and they want to go to an amusement park. What's the problem here? How tall do you have to be to ride on anything in an amusement park? 42 inches tall, right?
An inch.
So, MakerBot operators live for problems like this. He just made custom orthotics for his daughter that were 1/2 inch and saved the day. And that's not the kind of thing that you can imagine making before you have a MakerBot.
Right.
That's the kind of thing you get to be a superhero after you have a MakerBot, and you're just ready for those kind of moments. Like, there's another story of a guy named Marty, whose username is Schmarty, and we hired him actually. And, but he had a problem where he moved and he was able to get shower curtains, but not shower curtain rod thingamajiggers.
Yeah.
They just didn't have them. And he's like, this is a job for a MakerBot operator, right?
Superhero to the rescue.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then he shared it, and everybody's like, oh, those are crap. We're going to make better ones with like devil's horns on them and make them look like bones or whatever. Like,
so let's talk about
20 different shower curtains.
Is that where you see it's going? Literally on demand. Like I don't need to get anything anymore. Like I'm just gonna make this cup because I didn't,
Yeah, I mean cups are. It's interesting. There's a lot of things where the supply chain is pretty well sorted. Like there's probably 100 cups in this room, so you probably don't need to make
that,
one. Unless you want to make it with style or put your face on it or something like that.
Okay, so
which
cup
is
was
cool.
a bad example. But
Or you want to put your brand on it. I mean, actually,
Yeah.
we sell a lot to brands that actually make like custom things for promotional stuff. Like Yelp is one of our customers, and you wouldn't think like you'd be like, okay, like our big customers are like NASA and Lockheed Martin and stuff like that. But then like Yelp, like okay, like and they just make cool stuff for making cool stuff. Like they just.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm just starting to think about it, and I'm like, wow, what about, like, are there security issues with that? Like, let's say you could print, like, keys or something.
You can.
I know.
Actually, it's awesome.
I know it's awesome. But
we have this thing
then
on...
people have my keys. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, really handy.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yes.
So there's actually what we call a customizer on Thingiverse, which is a thing that is customizable.
Right.
So it's really, there's a programming language for things that you can make up and extract variables and have them, the end user be able to change them, which you can use sliders and puts things in.
Yeah.
In this case, you literally look at your key and you kind of and you hold it up to a picture and you adjust the values of each of the little thingamadiggers, and then you print out a key. And it's not going to work. It's plastic, so
but still, it's a key.
It'll work once.
Yeah. Okay, so I need to get eye scanners now and everything. Is that what you're talking
Eye
about?
scanners?
Like eye scanners, like, because security, safety.
You don't want to do that, actually.
Okay.
Because then you get like into Blade Runner territory.
Right. But I'm just thinking like...
Where they take out your eyeballs and to get into your house.
Yeah, that's not good.
That happened in Korea. There was a guy who had a car that had a thumb scanner to get into it, and he totally got jacked. And they put him in the trunk, and when the car ran out of gas, they were like,
we need his thumb.
We need to get into this car. How does it work? He's like, well, it's cool technology. I put my thumb here. And they're like, uh-huh.
And then he had to print a new thumb. And it all comes back around.
I thought, when the iPhone came out with that scanning stuff, I was like, oh, man, they haven't watched this movie.
Yeah, no, that's,
So another thing I want to talk about is, so we also just launched the MakerBot Digitizer.
Yeah, I was going to actually
desktop 3D scanner.
Yep.
So this kind of what gives you the washer-dryer combo. You've got the MakerBot Replicator, which takes virtual things and makes them physical, and now you've got a MakerBot Digitizer that makes physical things and makes them digital. And this sort of solves a huge problem, which is how many of you can use AutoCAD or SolidWorks really well?
No one.
Bam!
Yeah.
You're hired.
Yeah.
That's not enough if you want to create a world where people can design things.
Right. It's too hard.
And those are the tools of 10 years ago. And now you don't have to do that. If you want to make something, you can take Play-Doh or clay, and you can make a mock-up of it and get started, and then scan it. It takes 12 minutes to scan it with lasers.
Wow.
It's always a bonus, like lasers.
Lasers are cool.
And then...
they're cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things that was like, what kind of technology should we use for our scanner?
Definitely lasers.
Use lasers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the other options? I don't know.
Well, there's like the Connect technology, which is good for actually scanning people, but not so good. It doesn't do small things.
Right.
So
It doesn't sound as cool.
we wanted to make one also that would make things that then you could make on your MakerBot. That was
okay.
It's interesting. Most scanners that were out there before we came out with ours are all focused on very specific goals. Like there's like boat scanners.
Right.
They cost like 30 grand, and you put dots all over your boat hull, and then you scan it, and you're
That'd be
like,
neat.
okay, let's put this in a virtual wave chamber. I don't know.
That's pretty neat.
But we wanted to make something that had an application of just making
so you could
stuff
print
that
a boat.
size.
That's pretty cool. How big can you make it? Like, what can you make? Like, what's the size requirement? Like,
Well, like the true MakerBot operator has like no boundaries, like no limitations. So, but a MakerBot can only make things the size of it, like a size 8 shoebox.
Right.
So, but you can make pretty much anything out of components that are the size 8
So you literally
shoebox.
print each piece.
Yeah, there's an artist named Cosmo Wenman who does absurd. He goes into museums. He's in Paris right now, I think. And he goes any museum that you can go into and take pictures of. You can use another scanning technology called by Autodesk called 123D Catch, which is super awesome. Super awesome. Like Autodesk is like figuring out how to become relevant in a post CAD world. And one of their applications is this thing where you take a bunch of pictures of something and then you can upload them. It does all this photogrammetry math, which is like actually super processor intensive. And
wow.
But anyway, this artist goes in and he captures art from like that the Romans did, and then he makes replicas of it and mods them and mashes them up and does
like life size.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
So
Very cool.
there's also like I will like the point. We're at this really great. We're in the best time ever.
Right.
Like what you saw with the hackathon, like, is people making stuff in no time flat that could actually like legitimately fly. Like that just should not be possible, but it is. And in hardware, it's actually become a lot easier. It still takes a lot of time to get a hardware startup off the ground, but you can get off the ground a lot faster. You can spin up electronics. You can use a 3D printer to handle the look and feel. There's software that you can snag and modify to get something to work pretty sketchy, but will work. And so you can try. It's like the best time ever to just like get into stuff and have an idea.
And I love that coming from you with your background being a teacher. And I think that's a huge lesson learned for anybody here is that it doesn't matter. You can start whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a bad idea to other people, it doesn't matter as long as it's a good idea to you. Like, if you just want to make one thing now, like it used to not be like legitimately possible to just make one thing. You had to make 10,000 or more. That was just the deal. Like, and you had to probably make friends with a tycoon who had a factory, and like that's not easy either.
Right.
Now you can like be like, I want this thing. Like, there's a guy in New Jersey who's literally a rock star, and he's also the guy in his band who does all the merchandising. And he uses a Square to like sell T-shirts and stuff at his shows. And he didn't like that the Square spun around because it's in the headphone jack. It spins around.
It's kind of annoying because they can break off.
He just didn't like that. So he prototyped something with Legos that would make it so it wouldn't spin. And then he had to choose between like traditional manufacturing, which is like purchase some tooling. He got a quote for $6,000 to make to make the tooling, which is like the mold.
Okay. Mold,
you put that in an injection molding machine. It goes. And instead, he bought a MakerBot, and he runs his MakerBot like 24 hours a day. And he sells these little things that people use with squares to make them better, not spin. And when he sold too many for one MakerBot, I was like, okay, then he's going to go get the injection molded part. No, he just went out and got another MakerBot. And when there's a new iPhone that comes out, he can remodel it in like under an hour and be selling product that day that matches the product. So that kind of flexibility and ability, he just made one for himself and was like, I'm going to make a bunch of them. And now he's got all these other ideas for products that are very low barrier to entry. He can just mock them up, try them out, put them on the internet, and if people buy them, and
definitely
he can sell them, and if they buy more, he'll make more.
Yeah, it's catalyzing people's creativity and putting it in their hands. That's great. So one more question. I know we're a little bit over time, and then we're going to announce our winners here tonight or today. One lesson learned that you can kind of share with the rest of the audience here as their last takeaway that you learned along your startup journey. This is all about the startup journey, and I want to hear what you have to say. The biggest thing you've learned.
I think it's the importance of obsession. Like this kind of like being just like being obsessive. I didn't realize how important that was. Like, there's all these things you learn when you look back. Like, it was the panel with all the people being like, this, that, and the other. Like, they didn't know that before they started. That's all stuff that you look back on. But one of the things that we, at MakerBot had was we were just obsessed with kind of getting it the best it could possibly be with the resources we had at hand. And, that meant that I answered all the support emails and support calls for the first 2.5 years. So it's like that kind of like level, like, and then it turns out that's not normal. Like other people just hire people at that point. But that sort of obsession.
Become obsessed.
Yeah. Or make sure, if you're not obsessed with your product, fuck it.
Do something else.
Don't, like, if you're not obsessed with your product, screw it, or don't do it. Like, I would say, like, of the startups that are here, like, half of them probably, they need to take a real good look at, like, is this something that I'm willing to be obsessed about and for 5 or 10 years? Like, it's one of those things that's like, and if it's not, like, kill it right now and do so, and chalk it up and get on to the next thing. I think that, like, So that's kind of the obsession. That's what I would do is like, if you're not feeling it, like kill it now. Like,
Right. Don't go
take
any
it out
longer.
behind the barn and shoot it and apply those resources to other things.
I love it. Let's hear it for Bre Pettis. Thank you so much.
Good to be here.